Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're not stepping into a myth, not some roaring saga with dragons and glory. No, tonight we drift into the cold, quiet truth. Welcome aboard. This is not the Hollywood version of the Vikings. There's no thunder, no epic music, no heroic shouts across burning shores. This is the real sea, the one that's endless and gray, the one that doesn't care who you are. But before we set sail, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if this kind of calm, immersive journey is your thing. I'd also love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always beautiful to see this little crew forming from all over the world. All right, now, dim your lights. Let the background hum in your room settle. Let your hands fall still, and let's begin. The fire is low. The coals are dim. The wind hushes over water, and the sea, once loud, is quiet now. Tonight, you will leave the land behind. You will step onto old wood and drift. You will feel the creak beneath your feet, the weight of sky overhead, the steady pull of waves, and the long, slow silence of the open sea. You are not alone. Around you, men stir in cloaks. Their hands are rough, their beards salted, their backs bent from the oar. They do not speak often, but when they do, their voices are soft, deep with sleep and memory. This is the Viking ship, the Nair, the Snekja, the long, silent shadow across the waves, a place of order, of hardship, of waiting. You'll sit with them now, among the crew. You'll feel the slow rhythm of the oar, the wet chill in your boots, the ache in your arms, the slow passage of time between stars. Let us drift there, slowly. Let us slip from now and sail backward into history. The wind is steady. The sail is full. Let us begin. The ship is long, narrow, low to the water, a black silhouette against the endless gray. It creaks softly, gently, like a cradle in a storm. But this is not a place of comfort. This is a place of labor, of silence, of breath and bone and aching shoulders. You are seated close to the middle, not by choice. There is no room for choice here, only oars and duty. One man to your left, another to your right. The wood bench beneath you is slick with old salt, with damp, with skin oil, and sometimes blood. The oar feels rough in your hands, worn smooth in places, splintered in others. Your palms are already tender, but you do not let go. You cannot let go. The command is soft, a word, maybe two, and then the rhythm begins. Forward, back, back. The oar dips into the sea, bites the water, lifts, falls, always the same, always together. There is no music, no song like the skalds sing of, only the sound of breath, of the sea, of the wood, of calloused hands adjusting their grip. Someone hums, a note held in the back of the throat, but it fades. The sea takes it. The salt stings your eyes, your lips, your wounds. It is everywhere, in your clothes, in your food, in your mouth when you sleep. It gathers in the folds of your tunic, in the corner of your eyes. You do not wipe it away. You sleep where you sit, or near the mast, curled like a child, wrapped in whatever you have, a sheepskin, a bit of fur, damp wool. The deck is always wet from spray, from storms, from the sweat of your body. Sleep comes in pieces, a few moments stolen here, a longer stretch when the wind favors the sail, but never deep, never warm. Your dreams are cold, the kind that leave you shivering even after waking. You eat with your fingers, always. There are no plates, no spoons, a chunk of dried fish, a slab of bread, ale, or thin soup, if someone thought to boil grain in the small pot kept lashed near the bow. Sometimes a piece of meat, cured, tough, you chew slowly, carefully. No one speaks while eating. There is no conversation, just the sound of teeth. Relieving yourself is done over the edge, at night, if the sea is calm. If it is not, you wait, or you do what must be done and say nothing. No one looks, no one comments. The smell is just another part of the voyage. The men beside you change. Sometimes they shift positions. Sometimes they vanish. One day a man coughs. The next he does not rise. His body is wrapped quietly, without ceremony, and slipped into the sea. You do not cry. No one does. There is no time for that. Grief waits for land. The cold is a living thing. It creeps, slowly, patiently. It bites your fingers. It hides beneath your nails. It sleeps in the wet fabric of your boots. When you speak, your breath fogs, then disappears, like smoke. The ship itself is alive. You can feel it. The long spine beneath your feet, the ribs curving outward, the soft groan of planks as they flex against the waves. She knows her path. You trust her. You have to. Above you, the sail, rectangular, stained with age, sometimes red, sometimes striped, always patched, always heavy. It flaps when idle, but when the wind is right, it fills, it pulls. The oars come in. Arms rest, faces lift, but even then, the work does not end. There is always something to fix. A frayed rope, a split plank, a broken oar. You mend with what you have. You improvise. You adapt. Some men carve as they wait. Little figures, faces, dragons. Their knives move in slow rhythm, not for beauty, but for memory, for calm, for prayer. There is order on board, a chain of command. But it is quiet, understood. The helmsman watches the sky, the waves, the birds. He sees what others miss. His voice is seldom raised, but always heard. You follow, not because of fear, but because there is no other way. The stars become your companions, points of light, always the same. You learn them. Slowly, the belt, the cup, the swan. Some mark the passage of time. Others show the way home. When the sky is clear, you lie back just a little and look up. The cold sky is endless, but there is comfort in it. These same stars shone on the boats that came before you, that will come after. The sea is not always cruel. Sometimes it is still, a mirror, broken only by your own wake. In those moments, the silence is deep, holy. You feel the weight of it, like a hand on your chest. And then a gull cries. A wave slaps the hull. The spell breaks. The work returns. The crew is many things. Old men, young boys, farmers, some taken from villages, some born on boats. All are bound now together, by the sea, by the ship, by the oars. You learn their rhythms, the sound of their sleep, the smell of their sweat, the way they hold their cups. You stop seeing faces, only movements, only sounds. You become part of the ship, just another piece of it. Days pass, you do not count them, only the changes in wind, the feel of the sun, the angle of the moon. You mark time by rope burns, by bruises, by the weight of your limbs. Sometimes you hear voices, not those of the crew, others whispering. In the dark, on the wind, you do not speak of them, but you are not alone in hearing them. Superstition runs deep. Small charms hang from belts, bits of bone, of amber, runes scratched into wood, words muttered before sleep, before battle. before nothing at all. The sea tests you, and not always with storms, sometimes with calm, days without wind, without waves, just sun and silence. The worst kind, the kind that makes men restless. Then comes the storm, sudden, angry. You lash down what you can. Hands work quickly, even in panic. The sail is pulled, the oars lifted. The ship rides, the swells, up, down, up again. The dragon head at the prow snarls, its wood dark with rain. Lightning splits the sky. You grip the sides of the ship and pray without words. The storm passes. Always, eventually. What is left is quiet. A sob, a laugh, a man missing or not. This is the way of things. Some days you spot land, a low smudge on the horizon. Birds wheel above it. You do not cheer, not yet. Sometimes it is real. Sometimes it is a trick. You learn to wait, to believe only what your feet can touch. And when you do land, it is not always safe, not always welcoming, but it is solid, and that is enough. You walk awkwardly, legs used to swaying. The ground is too still, too certain, but you adjust. You always do. Then you reload, reboard, return to the sea. This is the cycle. Leave, row, survive, land, repeat. You share stories, low and slow, around a tiny fire built on a beach. Faces glowing, shadows tall. A tale of whales the size of mountains, of women who wait beneath the waves, of coins in mouths and ravens overhead. You listen, you speak, you fall silent again. Sometimes a man sings, not a warrior's song, but something old, something remembered from childhood. A mother's song, a tune from the hearth. The words don't matter, only the melody. You remember your home, the shape of your roof, the sound of goats, the color of the fields in late summer. Then the memory fades. The sea takes it. There is a ritual before battle, simple, a touch of the blade, a whispered name, a look to the sky. No one teaches you this. You learn by watching. Sometimes you see things, shapes on the horizon, flickers in the mist. You blink. They vanish. You say nothing. You never say anything. You begin to change. Your skin thickens. Your mind slows. Your body adjusts. You sleep in bursts. Eat without complaint. Move with the rhythm of the hull. The silence becomes a comfort. The labor a kind of meditation. You row, you row, you row. When it ends, if it ends, you will remember this, not as glory, not as triumph, but as a season, a long, salt-stung winter that lived on water. This is what it was like to sail with a Viking crew, to live on the sea, to become part of the ship, to forget the land, to remember only the stars, and to let the rhythm carry you forward, always forward, into the mist, into the history, and into the quiet that waits beyond the next wave. The sea lies still tonight, wide, endless, a silver sheet beneath the stars. The sky is open, soft with starlight. A gentle wind moves across the water like a breath, and in this stillness we remember a man whose name moved like a storm. Harald, son of Sigurd, called Hardrada, the hard ruler. But once he was just a boy, a younger son, born into a time of iron, of bitter kings and broken vows, a time when peace never lasted and ambition grew like fire beneath frost. He was born around the year 1015 in a Norway still tangled in struggle. His half-brother was Olaf Haraldsson, a man of fierce conviction, crowned king in a country that had known too many kings. The boy Harald lived in the shadow of that ambition, tall even in youth, broad in the chest, with a strong brow and keen eyes. People said he would grow into something, though no one was sure what. He rarely smiled, but when he did, it was like the sun breaking briefly through fog. At 15, Harald followed Olaf to war. The year was 1030, the place Stiklestad, a name that would be spoken for centuries, a wide valley, rolling fields of wet grass, heavy clouds above. The clash was inevitable. Olaf's attempt to retake his throne ended in blood. Harald stood in the shield wall. His hands gripped the wood and iron of his round shield, his sword heavy at his side. He was still growing, his bones still uncertain. But he stood among warriors. The peasants came armed with scythes, axes, spears, their faces grim, their steps steady. They were not trained, but they had numbers. The battle broke like thunder. Harald fought as best he could, a boy among men. His arms ached, his breath came short. He slipped in blood, in mud. In the heat of it, he saw Olaf fall, struck down, a saint in the making. But at that moment, just a dying man on a muddy slope. Harald was wounded, a deep cut in his leg. Some say he was pulled from the field by loyal men. Others say he crawled, gritting his teeth, leaving a trail in the mud. He survived, but the world he knew did not. Norway was lost, again, and so he fled, east, into the lands of the Russ, across cold rivers, through forests of birch and pine, over ice-cracked earth, into the realm of Kiev. There he found a kind of safety. Yaroslav, the wise, ruled the land, a prince of strategy, of letters, of power balanced carefully. Yaroslav took him in, gave him shelter, food, rest. But Harald was not content to heal. He sought purpose. He became a commander, a soldier of fortune, a man whose sword served foreign rulers, whose eyes watched every skirmish for a lesson. He fought in steppe campaigns against tribes whose names now drift in dust. He led men across frozen rivers, slept in tents beneath the aurora, ate roasted meat beside fires that hissed in snow. His fame grew quietly in earned respect. Still, he was not done. South now, always moving, into the heart of empires, to Constantinople. Imagine it. Marble towers catching the sun, a city of domes and chants, markets alive with color, perfume, incense, bells echoing at dawn, Latin, Greek, Norse, all spoken within a single hour's walk. Harald arrived not as a beggar, but as a warrior, and entered the ranks of the Varangian Guard, an elite corps, the emperor's axe-bearing protectors, foreigners, loyal by coin, feared by all. They wore black cloaks, carried axes taller than a man, their discipline unmatched, their silence chilling. Harald stood out, not just for his height or strength, but for how he watched, listened, waited. He served in Sicily, suppressing revolts, in the Holy Land, guarding pilgrims, in Anatolia, striking at rebels. Each battle was different. The terrain changed, but his resolve remained. The stories multiplied, some true, some colored by saga. One tells of Harald escaping a besieged city by tying himself beneath a corpse, floated out of the gates, rescued by night. Another, that he sang poems of longing at night, of Norway, of fjords, of snow on pine branches. He grew wealthy, quietly, paid in gold. He sent treasure north by trusted men. He never forgot home. Years passed. His hair grew longer, his beard fuller. He stood like a king, but wore no crown until he left, returned to the north to claim what he believed was his, Norway. But he did not come alone. He returned with ships, with hardened men, with gold, with stories, and with ambition as sharp as ever. But Norway was not empty. Magnus ruled, son of Olaf, Harald's nephew. They met, tension thick. Some expected war. But the land had seen enough of that. A compromise was struck. They would rule jointly, but only for a short time. Magnus died young, and Harald became sole king. He ruled from 1046 until his death in 1066, 20 years, a generation. He built ships, fortified cities, levied taxes, waged war. His greatest rivalry was with Denmark, with King Sweyn. Year after year, Harald raided the Danish coasts. Longships slipped into harbors by moonlight. Villages burned, wealth taken. But Denmark resisted, held its own. It was not glory. It was exhaustion. Still, Harald pressed on. His court was stern, orderly. He was not loved by all, but his authority held. He promoted trade law, Christianity, but never softened. Then, in his final year, he turned west to England, a kingdom reeling. King Edward the Confessor had died. Without clear heir, Harald Godwinson took the crown, but others claimed it, including Harald. He believed an old agreement gave him right. He allied with Tostig, Harald's exiled brother. They raised an army. They set sail. Imagine the fleet, over 300 ships, sails like wings, shields lining the rails, men with axes, spears, helmets of iron. They landed in the north of England, fought at Fulford won, took hostages, demanded supplies, then waited. But Harald Godwinson marched fast from the south and surprised them at Stamford Bridge. September 25th, 1066. A hot day, unusual for autumn. The Norwegians were unarmored, many unprepared, yet they fought. There was a lone Viking who held the bridge, swung his axe, held the English at bay until a spear was thrust from below. Then the rush began. Harald fought with fury, tall, strong. Some say he struck down 20 men before a single arrow pierced his throat. He died upright, sword in hand. Tostig fell, too. The army broke. Only 24 ships sailed home. Out of more than 300, Norway wept quietly. The age of Viking kings was ending. Harald was the last of them, but not the last remembered. Now we sit with his story, not as conquest, but as memory, as mist on a cold fjord, as snow falling on a long-forgotten hall. He was a boy at Stiklestad, a wanderer in Russ, a commander in Byzantium, a king in Norway, and a ghost beneath English soil. Some say his saga ended there, but others say he lives still in songs, in names, in the long shadow cast by his ambition. Let us drift now, not in triumph, not in battle, but in rest, beneath the stars, over waters that forget. Let his name echo, slowly. Harald, son of Sigurd, called Hardrada, hard ruler, sea king, and now silence. The water is still, dark, unmoving. It laps gently against the stony shore, and beneath that surface, beneath centuries of drift and time, rest the bones of ancient ships. You would not see them, not with the eye, not unless you knew where to look. But they are there. The fjords of Norway, the cold lakes of Denmark, the buried estuaries of Greenland. They hold secrets, old secrets, wrapped in silt and time. Some wrecks were discovered by accident. A fisherman's net catching more than cod. A child's foot brushing old timber on a summer swim. Other times, the finding came with great care. Divers, scholars, archaeologists, searching inch by inch, for what remained. And when they are found, these ships do not look like stories. They are not proud. They do not gleam with dragon heads or fluttering sails. They are broken, softened, hollowed, but they are still beautiful. You must imagine them not as ruins, but as sleeping things. Shapes curled in mud, still holding the shape of what they once were. Long ribs, carved nails, stubborn beams. The Gokstead ship, dug from a burial mound in the late 1800s, lay for nearly 1,000 years beneath a farmer's field. It was long, sleek, built for speed and sea spray. Its planks fit tight like skin on bone, its ribs wide enough to cradle warriors and grain and gold. When unearthed, the ship seemed to breathe again, as if the earth itself had been holding its breath for a millennium, waiting. Then there is the Oseberg ship, another burial, a queen's ship, perhaps, laden with goods, with carved sleighs, with silk, with animals and bones. The prow curves like a question mark, carved so finely it seems to move even now, as if the ship is remembering waves, long forgotten, and beyond those, the ones not laid in mounds, but sunk, lost to the sea. Some went down in battle, their crews cut down or drowned, axes still buried in shields, spears rusted in the ribs of the vessel. Others went down in storm, wind howling, sails torn, hulls broken open like eggs against the rocks. A few, maybe, were sunk by betrayal. There are whispers in the sagas of ships sunk deliberately to prevent escape, to hide treasure, or to silence those who knew too much. But time is kind in its forgetting. It lets us wonder without judgment. Imagine the divers, hundreds of years later, their lights cutting only narrow tunnels through the murk, and then a shape, a line of rivets, a curve of hull. The remains of a ship long lost. They hover in silence, watching. There is a reverence to it, like stepping into a church no longer used, a place that still hums with memory. And what do these wrecks teach us? That Viking ships were not crude. They were not simple. They were marvels of engineering, built without modern tools, without blueprints, using only the eye, the hand. They were built clinker-style, plank over plank, each edge overlapping the next, fastened with iron rivets. The result was a hull that flexed, that moved with the sea, rather than fighting it. They had shallow drafts, letting them glide through rivers, slip onto beaches, vanish inland with surprising speed. They could be rowed or sailed. They had steering boards, early rudders, balanced with care. A single man could guide the whole ship with a steady hand and quiet focus, and they were built to last. Many sailed for decades. Some passed from father to son. Others were gifted between chieftains as signs of allegiance or tokens of peace. But even the strongest ships have endings. Some were run aground and left to rot. Others burned in ceremony or spite, and some simply vanished into the sea. There are still mysteries. Ships glimpsed once by sonar, then lost again. Ships recorded in old texts, but never found. One tale tells of a longship buried beneath a lake in Iceland. It is said to appear only on certain nights. When the moon is high, its silhouette seen just below the surface, then gone. Another speaks of a dragon ship hidden beneath a collapsed cave in Greenland, its cargo untouched, its crew sealed in ice. Are they real? Maybe not. But do they matter less? The sea keeps its secrets well. It is patient and deep. It does not reveal all at once. And perhaps that is for the best. There is something sacred in what remains hidden in the shapes we half see. in the stories we only almost remember. Let us linger here, beneath the fjord, with the ships that sleep below. The water cradles them, the earth presses close, and time breathes slowly in the dark. Here, the noise of oars is only a memory. The voices of the crew have faded. The salt is quiet on old wood, but the shape of their journey remains, a shadow, a whisper, a curve of timber in the silence. And as we rise again, breaking the surface, we leave them undisturbed. Let the ships sleep. Let the past be soft, and let us drift forward quietly, like a hole on still water. There are places along the coast, silent now, but once they bustled with shipbuilders, with blacksmiths, with carpenters whose hands were lined with the grain of oak, men who did not need drawings, who could see a ship in their minds before a single tree was felled. They would walk the forests, looking, listening. Not all trees would do. They searched for curves already present, a root that bent just so, a branch that matched the line of a prow. These builders knew it was not enough to shape the wood. You had to understand it, to respect its growth. And so, Viking ships were born from both craft and nature. They were not forced into shape. Every nail driven with intention. And when the ship was done, she was more than wood. She was alive, named, blessed, given gifts and blood. Some had prows carved like dragons to scare away sea spirits. Others bore serpents, horses, wolves, symbols of speed, power, fury. Their hulls were smeared with tar, sealed against the sea, and then they waited at shore, roped and still, until the time came when warriors and farmers and exiles climbed aboard with spears and cloaks and bread for the journey. The sea did not care who they were, only that they came prepared, and always. Some ships did not return. They say that in certain fjords, if you listen just before dawn, you can hear a creak, as if something old shifts beneath the water, not from waves, but from memory. A groan of timber, long drowned. It is not fearsome, only familiar, like the sigh of an old friend. Some people say those ships remember, that deep down they still dream of sailing, of foam against hull, of the push of oars, of gulls calling overhead, of men laughing, or weeping, or quiet. And perhaps they do, because these were not merely machines. They were companions, witnesses. They carried not only people, but burdens, hopes, grief. A ship leaving Norway might carry a man leaving everything he knew, a son cast out, a father seeking vengeance, a brother chasing trade, a dream, and the ship did not question. It only moved forward, into wind, into storm. What we now call North America. Imagine that, standing at the prow, seeing a new world break through the fog, trees taller than stories, rivers untouched, air so sharp it burned in the lungs, and the ship sturdy beneath their feet, the only thing tying them to home. But not all stories are voyages. Some ships were never meant to sail far. They were meant to carry someone to the afterlife. In Viking tradition, burial by ship was not just honor, it was belief. To die with a ship was to have transport beyond this world. A proper chieftain or a queen might be laid inside their vessel, their body dressed in fine robes, their fingers curled around sword or spindle, their goods placed all around them, food, animals, weapons, even servants in the oldest times, not as cruelty, but as preparation. The ship would be buried, covered in earth, a mound raised like a wave over its resting place. Other times, it was burned, flames reaching skyward, timber crackling, the hull collapsing in red light, not to destroy, but to release, to lift the spirit by smoke. The sagas speak of such burials, of smoke seen for miles, of kings sent into the horizon, of mourners singing until their voices cracked. And when the fire was out, the ashes left only the outline, a ship that once was, and is no more, even today. In some remote hills, you can find the shape, a shallow impression in the grass, the faint arch of a buried keel, like the ghost of a wave. Not all can see it, but if you lie down, put your ear to the earth, and listen, you might hear the echo of oars, of wind, of goodbye. And still, even now, new wrecks are found, beneath farms, under towns, at the bottom of lakes long drained. In 2018, one such ship was found in Astfold, Norway, hidden under a burial mound, detected not with eyes, but with radar. It had slept for over 1,000 years, beneath soil and grass, undisturbed, when they unearthed it. Carefully, with brushes and reverence, they found remnants of rivets, the ghost line of the keel, and nearby bones. Someone had been buried with the ship, perhaps its master, perhaps a woman of great status. We may never know, but we can imagine the long line of mourners, the chants, the tears, the weight of meaning placed into that vessel. And far out to sea, waves still strike forgotten rocks, where other ships once passed, where they vanished. The sea does not give all its gifts at once. It waits, and so do we. We wait with patience, with care, with quiet, for another beam to rise from mud, for another story to surface, for the sea to speak again. Let us linger once more in the stillness beneath the fjords, where nothing moves, and yet everything remembers. Let us imagine one last wreck, never found, never named, a small ship, perhaps, with worn shields, a broken mast, a single gold coin hidden near the helm, carried by a boy who thought it might be lucky. The ship went down in fog. No battle, no storm, just a slow leak, a quiet sinking, no cries, only surprise. And now it lies there, silent, settled, but not lost, because we are here. And in remembering it, even in imagining it, we give it breath once more. Even a whisper keeps the story alive. Let the ships remain, let them sleep, for the sea holds them gently now, and the tide moves on. The wind is slow this morning, the sail flutters. A gull wheels overhead, calling once, then vanishing into the pale sky. A ship drifts upon the gray sea, low in the water, long, narrow, its oars pulled in, resting like limbs after labor. And aboard, men, rough hands, salt-streaked cloaks, faces browned by wind and years, eyes that squint into the horizon, always searching. These are not warriors today, not raiders or heroes or ghosts of saga. They are simply sailors. And life aboard a Viking ship, though feared by others, was not always glory or conquest. It was work. It was rhythm. It was surviving the endless sea. Let us step aboard. Let us drift with them and listen. The day begins before dawn, not with a horn, not with command, but with the creak of timber, the whisper of movement, a man coughing, another rubbing his eyes, someone muttering about the cold. There is no privacy aboard, only bodies, cloaks, rough-hewn benches. If it rained in the night, their cloaks are damp. If it froze, breath plumes from their mouths in little clouds. The sea never sleeps, and neither do its discomforts. But they rise, stretch, shake out stiffness, refasten their belts. tuck knives back into boots, and always check the sail. Check the ropes, check the sea. There is no breakfast spread waiting, no fire crackling with porridge, just a bit of dried meat, hard bread, if they're lucky, dried apples or nuts, the drink, water when it lasts, ale when it doesn't spoil, and when the water runs low or begins to rot in the barrel, they drink sparingly, carefully. Salt water, after all, is a liar. It promises relief and delivers thirst. The sail may be raised if the wind favors. Otherwise, the oars. Each man has his place, not just by chance, but by need. The strongest men are set near the middle, where the oars are heaviest. Smaller men take the bow and stern. They row in time. A drum may beat or a chant, something to keep rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. Arms pulling. The sound is hypnotic, like a heartbeat. Sometimes they row for hours, sometimes for days. There are blisters, cracked skin, shoulders that ache like fire, and always the cold or the sweat, depending on the sea's mood. And when they stop, when the oars pull in, there is no applause, no relief, just rest. Until the next time, meals are taken as they can be. No kitchens, no stoves, only small braziers, when it's safe to light them, but often it's not. So food is cold, preserved, sometimes salted fish, sometimes dried goat, always hard, always dry. The men chew slowly, not talking much. Seasickness can still surprise even the seasoned, and no one wants to tempt fate with full bellies. If they catch a seal, or a bird, or fish, there is cheer. A fire might be lit on shore that night, bones thrown into the waves, thanks murmured to the old gods, even among Christians. Some things never leave the blood. Clothes are layered, wool, fur, leather. Boots are oiled against the damp. Gloves are rare and treasured. Cloaks double as blankets, as pillows, as burial shrouds. If needed, they sleep where they sit. No hammocks, no bunks, only the bench or the deck or each other. Sometimes they sleep huddled like wolves to fight off the chill, to protect one another from rolling overboard. There are watches at night, men who must stay awake, eyes scanning for land, for ships, for danger. It is not noble, it is not thrilling, but it is necessary. And when the stars are out on clear nights, some men whisper their names. Old sailors knew them all, that won their Thor's belt, and the sea goat, the North Star. It's the sailor's anchor, a light that does not drift. Many men trusted it more than any lord. But not all time is toil. When the weather is calm and the sea's kind, men talk. They play simple games, carve small trinkets, sharpen blades, patch clothes. They sing low songs, sad ones, about home, about girls with golden hair, about cows in green pastures, about the sound of a harp in a smoky hall, and sometimes about death. One man might pull out a bone flute, another a harp no larger than a hand, of dragons, of dead kings, of gods who walk in human form. One sailor swears he saw a kraken once, its eye as big as a shield, tentacles that brushed the hull. Another tells of a ghost ship, no crew, only a sail, bleeding red. No one believes, and yet no one laughs, because who knows? The sea is wide and deep, and it does not always explain itself. They keep to themselves, mostly. There is a hierarchy, unspoken but strong. The helmsman, the navigator, the leader, often called the steersman, earns respect, not with words, but with calm hands. with the ability to find the coast when clouds blot the sky. Disputes are settled quietly, or with fists, but quickly. On a ship, there is no room for long grudges, only the sea, and sometimes they land, pulling the ship onto shore, rolling it up with logs, securing it against tide and thief. They cook, stretch, gather wood, laugh more easily on land. A few men go inland, trading beads or combs or linen for fish or barley or news. Others simply sit, staring at trees, at flowers, at things that don't move as the sea does. They sleep longer on land, but not forever. The ship calls, as does duty, or gold, or revenge, and so they leave again. They are not always young. Some sailors are gray-bearded, their skin like cured hide, their eyes full of places no one else has seen. Others are barely boys, 15, 16, eager, clumsy, scared, but they learn quickly, or they're left behind. And when one dies, whether from sickness or storm or sword, the men do not wail. They nod, wrap the body in cloth, and slide it into the sea. Or, if they're lucky, they bury it on land, raise a stone, say a name, then move on. Because that is the sailor's way, to move forward, always, into the wind, toward something unseen, not always knowing what waits, but going anyway. And so the day ends, the sail is furled, the oars stowed. Men curl into cloaks, muttering, dreaming. The ship rocks gently, a lullaby of old wood and dark waves. And above, stars again, silent, watching, and we drift with them, listening as the sea whispers against the hull, as the men breathe, as time passes, quietly. The sea is darker now. Clouds have gathered, the sun is hidden, but the wind is still low, and the ship glides without rush, cutting through the gray like a memory in motion. The men speak less today. It's not fear, it's something softer, a kind of quiet that only comes from many days at sea, the kind that settles in your bones, where even laughter, when it comes, feels like a candle flickering in a cave. They've been out for weeks. The coastline has vanished behind them. No village smoke, no green hills, just waves that roll like the rise and fall of thought, like time made water. When you live on the sea long enough, the land begins to feel unreal. A dream you once had, a place of smells, dirt, bread, animals, of things you no longer touch. In the wound that refuses to close, your skin changes, cracks in new ways. Your voice grows hoarse from shouting over wind. Even your balance shifts. On land, you feel dizzy, but here, even in sleep, you rock with the swell. You begin to feel you were made for this, or maybe remade by it. One man sits near the stern. He is carving something, slowly, with care. A little horse, maybe, or a wolf. It's hard to tell yet. His fingers are calloused, but precise. Another watches. They don't speak, they just sit. This is a kind of language, too. From weeks of being needed, he closes his eyes for a moment, just a breath, and dreams begin to flutter in like birds. He sees home, or something like it, but the creak of the mast brings him back. The sea does not wait. There is a ritual aboard that no one talks about. Each man, before sleep, touches something small, a token, a bit of bone, a rune, a carved bead. Not all do it, but most. They do not believe they are superstitious. But when the sea rises, and the wind howls, and the ship groans like a dying beast, every hand reaches for something. Sometimes that's faith. Sometimes it's a knife. They talk about women, sometimes in low voices, not always crude, not always longing, sometimes just memories. A sister's wedding, a daughter learning to walk, a woman who gave you soup when you were cold. The sea does not make you forget women. It reminds you of how far they are. Rain comes, not sudden, but steady, like a story you've heard before. Hoods go up, blankets are pulled tighter. Buckets are set out to catch the water. Clean water, better than what sits in the barrels below. No one complains. Rain is company. Rain is news. A man begins humming, just a line. A tune passed down. Another joins in, then stops. They never sing the whole thing, only pieces, like scattered bones. There is a man who always wakes first. No one knows how he does it. He checks the knots, the mast, the rudder, not because he must. There's no order, but because he cannot not do it. Some men are like that, born to worry, born to move. The ship gives him purpose. The sea gives him watchfulness. He knows every sound of the hull, every creak, every flap of cloth. If the ship speaks, he's the first to hear. Sometimes they find driftwood, a log, a barrel, a shattered piece of a hull. They do not touch it quickly. They circle first. They watch, because sometimes driftwood is just driftwood, and sometimes it's a grave. They fish when they can. Hooks tied to lines, dropped into the deep. No rods, no reels, just patience. Sometimes nothing bites. Sometimes a silver flash breaks the surface. When it does, there is cheer, smiles. A man claps the catcher's back. The fish is cleaned with a sharp knife, guts thrown to the gulls. It tastes better than dried meat, warmer, more real. One sailor swears fish is what keeps a man sane at sea. Another says it's singing. A third says it's neither. It's silence. There is no clock, only the sun. It's rising. It's falling. The way it hangs in the sky tells them when to eat, when to row, when to sleep. Clouds make this harder, but they guess. Time on a ship is not kept in hours. It's kept in actions. How many meals since the last land? How many strokes of the oar until rest? How many days of calm before the storm? This is sailor's time. Long, slow, circular. One night, the stars vanish. Clouds cover the sky. The sea is ink. No moon, no wind. The ship floats, becalmed, and the men wait. Nothing can be done. No sail to raise, no or to pull. Only trust. The silence is heavy. Some whisper prayers. Some tell riddles. One man simply stares into the dark, looking for something or nothing. Morning comes, as it always does. The wind returns, small, steady, and the ship moves again like it never stopped. That's how the sea is. It forgets, and so do the men. Not everything, but enough. They forget how long they've been gone, how far they've come, why they left. They remember only what matters. The rope in the hand, the blade at the belt, the song half sung, the smell of salt and wood and wool. They see seabirds. That means land. Maybe a day away, maybe two. Their bodies lean forward without realizing land is not always a destination. Sometimes it's a pause, a chance to mend sails, to wash clothes, to dry cloaks. Sometimes it's home. Other times, just another place to leave behind. But for now, they are still on the water, still held by the vastness, still following the invisible thread that all sailors chase, the line that leads from one shore to another, through storm, through starlight, through silence, and we drift with them, not to fight, not to raid, not to conquer, but to witness, to breathe with them, to feel for a moment what it was to be one of them. A sailor on a Viking ship, somewhere in time, between one land and the next. The wind has stilled again, the sail hangs limp. The sea is a mirror, glass smooth, wide as the sky. And tonight, we drift not only through waves, but through beliefs, through the silent spaces between myth and man, through the minds of Viking sailors when they looked upward or inward and asked not where, but why. For even the hardest warriors, the most weathered hands, carried faith, not always spoken, but always there, like the stars or the tide. Tonight, we speak not of battle, but of gods. They did not call it religion, not in the way later peoples might. For them, it was a truth that lived in wood, in stone, in storms. The world was not built by men. It was shaped by giants, ordered by gods, watched by spirits, and the sea. The sea was alive. A sailor wakes in the dark. He checks the ropes, his feet bare on the planks. He stops, listens. The waves make a strange sound. He mutters a name, Jair, the sea god, old as the foam, cold as the deep, beard full of shipwrecks and drowned bones. They feared Jair, but they also respected him. When the waves rose too high, they said he was angry. When the foam hissed, they said he was boiling a kettle. When a man was lost, they said he'd been claimed, a guest in Jair's hall now. No prayers were offered, not like in churches, but sacrifices, yes. A cut of meat overboard, a splash of ale, a whispered word before sleep. Sailors are quiet believers. They also feared Jair's wife. She cast nets, they said, not to fish, but to catch men. If a sailor drowned and didn't surface, she had him, held fast in her web beneath the sea. No one liked to speak her name too loud. She was not cruel, but she did not let go. Still, not all gods brought fear. Some brought strength. Thor, the hammer-bearer. They carved his sign into oars, into the mast, into their skin. A T-shape, simple, sharp, a token of protection. When thunder rolled across the ocean, they did not cower. They grinned. Thor was testing his hammer, fighting giants in the east. Each storm a blow, each flash a strike. Sailors loved Thor, not because he was gentle, but because he was familiar, loud, brave, direct, like them. And Odin, he was harder to love, but impossible to ignore. One-eyed, cloaked, whispering wisdom only fools ignored. He did not protect, he taught, he gave vision and sacrifice. Some say he walked the decks, cloaked in mist, unseen but present. He watched men in silence, weighed their hearts. A good sailor feared Odin's interest. They believed ravens were his messengers, two of them, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory. If they circled the ship, the men grew wary. Was it a message, a warning, a test? No one could say, but heads would bow. Not in worship, in acknowledgement. The world had rules, and even the gods sailed it. They also whispered of Neshard, the sea god of calmer waters, the wind father. When the breeze came from the right direction, they gave thanks. When the current turned kind, they murmured his name. He was gentler than Jair, but no less vast. It said Njord could hear every creak of every hull, feel every rudder's turn. He loved ships, they believed, and he blessed good ones. Before launching a new longship, they would sometimes wet its prow with seawater. Let Njord taste it, they'd say. At night, huddled in cloaks, staring at the stars, they would tell stories of Loki's tricks, of Freya's tears turning to gold, of Baldur's death and the coming twilight of the gods, Ragnarok. Even if they didn't believe it all, they knew it the way you know a song passed down, even if you don't sing it. It lives in you. These tales weren't entertainment. They were maps. Maps for the soul, for fear, for loss, for hope. One man speaks of a dream he had. He saw a woman, pale, crowned, riding a wolf through the clouds. The others go quiet. He says nothing more. They all know who she was. Hel, the death goddess, half beautiful, half frauding, keeper of the dead, not claimed by war. They do not mock him. They do not joke. Some nod. They too have seen her. In dreams, in waves. When the wind is right and the ship moves fast, they say Valkyries ride with them, invisible overhead, watching. If a man dies at sea, sword in hand, perhaps they'll lift him to Valhalla. But sailors know they are not warriors in war. They are warriors in waiting. The sea itself is a battlefield. Sometimes lightning strikes the water. The ship shudders. The sky screams. The men bow their heads. They don't need to speak. They know the gods are near, watching, weighing, waiting. And sometimes nothing happens. Just stars, just wind, just the gentle creak of rope on wood. And that, too, is holy. A kind of peace no land can give. In their chests, many war amulets. A Thor's hammer, a runestone, a tooth from a bear or a wolf. Not because it was magic, but because it meant something. It said, I carry my story with me. It said, I know who I am. The gods of the Norsemen were not above them. They were with them, on the ship, in the sail, in the storm. And when the journey ended, when the final breath came, and the oar dropped, and the sea grew still, they believed they would be met, not judged, but welcomed. In the flicker of firelight, in the lull of waves, in the hush before sleep, the old stories returned, not to frighten, but to remind that even out here, far from land, far from kin, they were not alone. Their ancestors had sailed this path. Their gods had walked these decks, and the stars above, just the eyes of giants, watching, or maybe just light. The ship rolls gently now. The stars are faint. The sky is a deep velvet blue, just before the first gray hints of dawn. And still, the men murmur stories of gods, of omens, of the quiet things they dare not say aloud when the sea is loud. Because when the world grows still, something else fills the silence. Belief. One old sailor, back against a barrel, traces a rune with his finger on the deck. Alges, he whispers, the rune of protection. He doesn't shout it, doesn't explain it, but he draws it every morning, and again at night, just once, just enough. The others see, but they don't ask. These things are understood. Runes were not just writing, not to them. They were power, symbols of forces greater than words. Each shape a bridge between men and meaning. On a long voyage, when wind and salt strip everything down, even the smallest symbol becomes sacred. A younger sailor, not more than 18 winters, fingers a small pouch around his neck. Inside, a sliver of bone from a wild boar, and a pebble, dark and smooth, taken from a stream back home. He was told to carry it by a wise woman, a vulva, one who speaks with the unseen. He doesn't know what the charm does, only that it feels wrong to take it off, especially now, with the sea so endless, the sky so wide. Not all their gods were distant. Some walked the land. Some even had names you could speak softly, like Freyr, a god of peace, of harvest, of fertility. Sailors did not speak of him much in the harshness of battle talk, but in the quiet, yes, especially when they thought of home, of fields, of green places beyond the gray sea. They would whisper his name when they saw whales breach in calm waters. or when dolphins followed the ship for hours. Freyr is watching, they'd say. And for a moment, the salt-worn men became boys again, barefoot in meadows, hearing the hum of bees and the laughter of spring. Some carried stories from their mothers. Freya, goddess of love and war, was not just myth. When the moonlight lit the waves like silver, she was not always kind, but she was powerful. And if you left a silver coin tucked near the mast before sailing, some said she'd see you home. Maybe not alive, but home. And what of Loki, the trickster, the firebringer? They didn't love him, but they couldn't forget him. When ropes tangled for no reason, when the stew spoiled though it was fresh, when an anchor came loose though tied firm. Loki's laughing, they muttered. Not angry, just wary, because Loki never stayed gone for long. Some of the sailors were Christians, especially later, as cross met hammer on distant shores. But even they, with their talk of one God, one heaven, still knocked on wood before sailing, still wore iron rings for protection, still listened quietly when the old stories were told by firelight. They didn't always admit it, but at sea, where no priest stands and no bell rings, the old gods still had power, even in whispers. There is a tale told from the north coast of Norway, of a ship that vanished in mist, not sunk, not wrecked, simply gone. Some say Jaeger took it whole to add to his collection. Others say it passed through a gate into a realm beneath the waves, where drowned sailors feast forever in a great hall, where the sea is calm and the mead is sweet, and every man is whole again. A kind of Valhalla for those who died not with sword in hand, but tiller. Even death, to a Viking sailor, was not the end. It was a change of place, a red sky at morning. The gods were warning them. A sudden cold wind, when no cloud showed. That was a giant passing by, a gull that would not leave the mast. That was a sign. It wasn't superstition, it was survival. A way to read the world when compasses did not exist and stars were sometimes swallowed by cloud. The gods, too, were sailors. So said the scouts. There is one tale of Angard riding a ship of flame across the sky, another of Thor lashing sea serpents with iron chains, and one more, older still, of the goddess Ving, her net, from the souls of those who feared death, catching only those who gave up. They weren't just myths, they were maps, ways to understand what could not be explained. When a man died, and no one knew why, the gods knew. That was enough. Even the ships themselves, the long, proud, dragon-prowed vessels, were built with belief in mind. The dragon's head was not only decoration, it was a warning to spirits, to land wights, to enemies, both mortal and unseen. Some would carve runes inside the keel, others would place bones beneath the mast, or blood the ship with a goat, once even a man, all to give the ship a soul, to make it more than wood, to make it alive. There are quiet stories, too, of ghost ships seen at twilight. No sail, no crew, only a flicker on the horizon, just after sundown. Sailors would not point. They would only lower their voices, because the dead still sail, and to speak of them too loud is to call them closer. When the voyage ends, when the anchor drops, when the hull kisses shore, the men step off in silence, not because they're tired, but because the world is too loud. The gods do not speak on land, not in the same way. On land, there are walls and roofs and laws. At sea, there is only sky and water and wind and the old names. So tonight, let us drift with those names, not shouted but breathed. Thor, Njord, Jar, Ran, Freya, Odin, Let us imagine their faces, not as they were, but as the sailors dreamed them. A towering man with a hammer, laughing in lightning. A woman with a net of gold and seaweed, eyes as deep as the ocean. A cloaked figure, seated on the mast, one eye glowing like starlight. Let us hear the creak of the ship, the soft splash of an oar. Let us see the sailor, the old one, asleep at last, his fingers still curled around the hilt of a blade worn smooth, a Thor's hammer on a leather thong across his chest, his breath slow, his dreams filled with sails and stars and voices long gone. For though the gods may be distant now, the sea remembers, and the wind still carries their names. And we, listening, drift further into sleep. The sails hang limp. The sea is a mirror. Not a wave breaks, not a ripple stirs. Only silence. The wind is gone. And in its absence, fear grows. For the Viking sailor, the wind was life. It filled the sail, pulled the hull, sang in the rigging. Without it, there was no motion, no direction, no purpose. To drift was not only dangerous, it was maddening. The sun beats down. The sky refuses to change. The sea reflects every glare, hour after hour, day after day. Still, the oars are too few, too heavy, too slow. You cannot row forever, not across the open sea. So you wait, and in the waiting, strange thoughts come. The stillness becomes a presence, a wait, a watcher. Some say the gods are testing you. Others say the sea is holding its breath. Some believe this is the time when spirits walk, when old dead sailors drift alongside, invisible, just out of sight. One man, older, grizzled, rubs his thumb over a splintered deck beam. He tells a story, in a voice low and measured, of a ship that drifted for 27 days. Water ran out, food spoiled. The youngest began to see things. Lights on the water, he says. No ship, no fire, just lights, floating, watching. The others don't ask what happened after, they know. Another hums softly, a lullaby from his childhood, off-key, thin with thirst, but it keeps something away. Not sleep, not madness, something deeper, the terror that this might be forever. The sky does not move, no clouds, no birds, no sign. You look at the horizon until your eyes ache, then you close them. But even then, the emptiness presses inward. Time stretches. A day becomes 2, then 5, then 10. You stop counting. The water barrels are checked constantly. Every man hopes for rain, just a little, enough to wet a cloth, to catch in a bowl, to drink and feel human again. When the rain does come, if it comes, they weep, not from sadness, but from relief. The sky has spoken. In sagas, these still times are rarely sung, but they existed. Even the greatest voyages, to Greenland, to Iceland, to Vinland, were punctuated by them. Silent pages in the story, but heavy ones. Imagine Leif Erikson staring into fog for days. Imagine the crew of Eric the Red, whispering beneath deck, wondering if the world had ended just beyond sight. In the stillness, even the bravest men feel small. Some tie charms to the mast, some pray. Others sit with their backs to the sea, unwilling to watch the unchanged horizon. Not because they fear what might come, but because they fear nothing will. The ship creaks, not from motion, but from settling. Wood strains in still water, like lungs that cannot breathe. The sail flaps once, a cruel gust, then falls again. The men look up with hope, then back down with despair. But not all is lost. They ration, they wait, and sometimes they sing, softly, old verses of gods, of women, of green hills and winter hearths. Songs are anchors. When the world forgets to move, memory becomes your compass. A young boy, the youngest aboard, stares into the water. He thinks he sees shapes below, not fish, not whales, something older. When asked, he says only they were looking up at me. The others do not laugh. They simply move him away from the edge. No one asks him to explain. Night falls again. The stars blink into view. Even in stillness, the sky moves. That comforts some, terrifies others. A sailor marks the same star each hour, hoping it will shift. It does not. The food is dry now. Hard bread, salted fish. One by one, appetites vanish. Sleep becomes erratic. Some nap at midday. Others lie awake at midnight. One man says he hasn't dreamed in 4 nights. Another says he can't stop when a breeze finally stirs. A true breeze, it comes with no warning. A ripple, a flutter, then a full gust. The sail catches, the ropes groan, the mast sings, and the men shout, not in joy, but in relief. The spell is broken. The sea exhales. The ship moves again. There is no celebration, not yet. Only movement, direction, purpose. Sails rise, oars dip. The ship begins again. In their stories, they will not speak long of the still time, but they will remember it, each in his own way. A silence so deep it echoed, a sun so bright it burned, a sky so unchanged it seemed made of stone. And how even then, even when it seemed the world had stopped, they kept faith in the wind, in the sea, in the voyage itself. And now, drifting with their memory, we breathe softly, we float forward, not quickly, not urgently, but steadily, as the ship moves, and the sky turns, and the water begins, once more, to whisper. The sea is moving now, but memory lingers. Stillness leaves a shadow. Even as wind returns, some part of the sailor remains in that moment, adrift, uncertain, listening too closely to silence. And sometimes, even after the ship sails free, they speak of what they saw, or thought they saw. A man dreams of a mountain in the sea, sharp and black, with fire at its heart. It calls his name, not in words, but in sound. Another swears he saw a white serpent in the water, mile long, coiling beneath the keel. It never surfaced, but its wake rocked the boat, though no wind stirred. They do not tell the whole crew, just a few, late at night, when they think no one else is awake, because they fear being thought mad, or worse, being believed. Sagas are full of beasts and signs, of whales that turn into islands, of women in the waves who sing and steal your breath, of ships that vanish, not from storms, but from silence. And it is in this quiet, this drifting, that those stories feel real. One man remembers a tale his grandfather told of a ship becalmed for 3 weeks near Iceland. On the 14th night, they began to hear bells, soft, distant, not from any church. They rang once every few minutes. No one could find the source. No birds flew near. No land approached. Just the bells. They turned back. The bells followed them for 3 days more. Another says he saw faces in the water. Not his reflection, but old faces, sunken, watching, their eyes wide as if forever surprised. He says they matched the old carvings on his father's longship. He does not say what he thinks it means. Fear in the stillness is different from fear in battle. In battle, you move, you shout, you bleed. In stillness, you think, you feel your heartbeat. You notice how dry your tongue is. how cracked your hands, how small the ship, how vast the sky. And suddenly, you are aware of every story you've ever heard of the sea swallowing men whole, not in fury, but in calm. A tale is told of a crew that went silent after a stillness. They returned to harbor, eyes wide, mouths shut. When asked what had happened, they only said, "We drifted," and never spoke again of that voyage. The younger men laugh at such stories, loudly, almost too loudly, but they glance over their shoulders when they do. The older ones don't laugh at all. They've seen things, or perhaps just felt them, and sometimes that's worse. There is a rhythm to sailing. Even in boredom, there is motion. But in stillness, the rhythm breaks. You feel outside of time, not in the past, not in the present, just paused. And in that pause, strange thoughts find a way in. You remember things you'd forgotten, people long dead, smiles long gone, words spoken years ago, suddenly loud again in your ears. Some men write on wood, scratches with a knife, markings they claim are for luck. Others whisper names into the sea, not prayers, just names, of mothers, of lost brothers, of girls once kissed beneath snowy trees. They say the sea listens. At night, without wind, the stars reflect perfectly in the water. You see two skies, and if you stare too long, it becomes hard to know which way is up. A man once tried to jump into the stars. They pulled him back in time, but for a moment, he believed. And that belief is not madness. It is the effect of waiting too long in silence. Stillness is not just the absence of wind. It is the presence of weight, of memory, of fear, of wonder, a test, not of strength. And when the ship moves again, the first few days feel strange. The creak of wood, the snap of sail, the splash of waves, sounds you missed, but now startle you, as if you'd forgotten they existed. Sailors who've been becalmed too long often become quiet. Even years later, they will speak of storms, of battles, of narrow escapes from reefs and pirates. But ask them about the windless days. They change the subject, or say nothing. One of the last known voyages of a Viking ship to Greenland ended not in storm or ice, but in calm. They drifted too far west. When the wind returned, they had lost their bearings, and when they found land again, it was not the land they knew. Some say they found Vinland, others say they were never seen again. But the last rune carved on the prow was a single line, a symbol meaning waiting. Even in today's world, sailors speak of stillness with a kind of dread. Modern ships have engines, radios, GPS, but the ocean is still the ocean. And when the wind disappears and the sky does not move, you are reminded of what those longboats felt, of what it meant to trust the sky and be denied. And so we drift again, in thought, in quiet, with the memory of those men, waiting beneath a sunless sky, listening to nothing, hearing everything. Let us honor their silence by keeping our own. Let us feel the slow roll of the sea, the gentle groan of timber, the creak of rope, the steady breath. Let the night stretch wide, the stars drift above, and the world hold still, not in fear, but in rest. Because now we know, even in stillness, we are moving. Even in silence, the sea speaks. And even when all seems still, the voyage continues. The winds grow sharp, the sun lowers in the sky. Each day, a little sooner. Each night, a little longer. The voyage ends. For now, not because of danger, but because of season. It is time to winter. The sea freezes in places, or turns so rough, no ship dares leave shore. And so, the men of the longboats find shelter, not in cities, not in great halls, but in farms, outposts, hidden inlets, tucked along cold coasts. Some join villages, others build makeshift camps, always close to wood, always close to water. A Viking winter is not just survival, it is ritual, a season apart, where the world grows quiet and men grow inward. The axe is hung, the sail is folded, the sword oiled and stored. Now begins a different battle, a test of patience, of warmth, of spirit. The house is long and low, built of timber and turf. Smoke slips from a hole in the roof. The snow piles high against the walls. Inside, shields hang on the walls. A single hearth glows red. This is winter. Days are short, but filled. Wood must be chopped, nets repaired, boots stitched. Food is rationed, but hearty. Salted fish, dried meats, hard bread, barley porridge, thickened with lard. Sometimes, if the hunt was kind, there is game, rabbit, goose, even deer. Everything cooked over the same central fire, the pot never fully emptied, flavors layered from day to day. By day, the men work. By night, they gather. Around the hearth, in the glow of embers, voices low, the sound of wind outside, of dogs shifting in sleep, of spoons scraping bowls, and then stories. One man speaks of a voyage south, of a port in the Frankish lands, of red wine and stone churches, and a market where he saw a harp that played itself. Another remembers a storm near the Shetlands, how the sky turned green, and how a gull flew beside their ship for 3 days without rest. A younger man tells of a dream, of a hall made of ice, where the gods sat quiet and looked straight through him. They listen, not to judge, but to remember, because winter is when stories grow long. When words fill the spaces left by silence, there are games, too. Knucklebones tossed in a carved bowl, wrestling matches on the packed dirt floor, even riddles, and sometimes a song, not loud, not proud, but slow, like a lullaby for grown men, carried on the hum of voices. They carve, weave, tend the fire, cook with quiet grace. Children play in corners, their toys carved from driftwood, miniature boats, tiny warriors, dolls with fur cloaks. The old ones sit near the fire, wrapped in thick cloaks, eyes half shut. Sometimes they speak, sometimes they only smile. Their presence is enough. The snow thickens outside, drifts against the door. Frost ferns along the edges of the window slit, but inside, all is soft. Heat from bodies, steam from broth, the occasional crack of a log, and the sense that this is how it has always been. Not all make it through the winter. Illness comes, or accident, or despair, but those who do emerge, changed, quieter, sterner, stronger. Winter burns away the unnecessary, leaves only what matters. Sometimes they walk into the woods, just to feel the cold, to hear the muffled crunch of snow beneath boots, to see the pale light between the trees. They breathe deep, let it sting, let it settle, then return, always return, because no one winters alone. Near midwinter, there is celebration, Yule, the longest night, and the promise that light will return. A great fire is lit, ale is passed. There is meat, fresh killed and slow roasted. They sing louder now, tell older stories, runes into the Yule log, for luck, for strength, for safe return. Yule is not jolly, Not like modern tales, it is solemn and sacred. They remember the dead, offer bits of bread to the fire, whisper names into the smoke, and in the quiet moments after, they listen to see if the ancestors answer. Sometimes in a crack of ember or a gust down the chimney. They do. And when the sun begins to return, when the days grow longer by minutes than hours, the change is felt in the bones. The snow still lies deep, but the sky holds a different blue. Hope begins to thaw. Boats are checked, oars tested, nets soaked and dried again. Blades are sharpened, helmets polished, eyes narrow, because soon they will sail again, but not yet. For now the hearth still glows, the longhouse breathes slow, and men who once roared at sea sit quiet in the firelight, not idle, but waiting, like wolves beneath snow, like seeds beneath frost. Let us sit with them for a while longer. Let us feel the peace of pause, the soft weight of fur across our shoulders, the hush of snow falling outside. Let us imagine the flicker of firelight across old wood, the warmth of stew in a wooden bowl, the faint sound of breath, steady and low, because this is winter, and winter too is part of the voyage. Outside, the trees hold still, they do not sway, they do not creak. They stand like silent watchers, their branches heavy with frost, their trunks buried in snow. And still the wind comes. It does not scream, it does not rush, it sighs through cracks in the wall, through the smallest spaces beneath the door. It comes in like an old ghost, and then settles, like breath, like age. Inside, the coals have burned low. The fire is not gone, but it is now a quiet thing, a red glow nestled in ash, like the heart of a sleeping animal. A man wakes in the dark. He does not speak. He stirs the fire, adds a log with careful hands, blows until the orange returns. And in that glow, the hall breathes again. It is deep night, the kind of night only winter knows, where the moon hides behind clouds, and the stars are few, and the whole world seems to hold its breath. And in that breath, memories walk. He remembers a hunt years ago, when the snow was waist-deep, and he tracked a lone elk across the ridge. He remembers the weight of the spear, the crunch of his steps, the sudden silence before the throw. He missed. But it does not matter, because he remembers how the trees parted, and how the elk turned, its eyes dark, enormous, understanding, and then vanished into the white. He never saw it again, but he has never forgotten. Another man dreams, not of the sea, but of his mother's voice, soft and humming, braiding his hair by the fire. Long before he ever held an axe, he wakes with tears, but tells no one, because winter is not for speaking everything. Some things are carried silently, like the way snow carries the sound of footsteps, muffled but real. The children are quieter now. The early days of play have passed. Now they whisper, whittle watch. They've begun to understand the rhythm of the season, how it asks for patience, how it teaches stillness. Even their games have changed. A boy lines up little ships along a bench, names each one after old captains, pretends a great storm comes, but in the end, he lets each one return home. He's changed the story. That is what winter does. The elders speak more now, not often, but when they do, no one interrupts. They speak of frost giants, of wolves so big they swallowed the moon, of the old gods who walk the world in disguise during winter nights. One says he once saw Odin at the edge of the forest, wrapped in a gray cloak, only one eye. He says the god nodded, and then was gone. No one laughs. They simply nod, because, in winter, who's to say what's real? They mend everything. Boots are patched, cloaks stitched, blades rewrapped, tools shaped new from old handles. Nothing is wasted, nothing forgotten. Even scraps of cloth are saved, turned into dolls, bandages, braids for the hair of the dead. Yes, even the dead are remembered now. There is a box in the corner, carved, heavy, inside. The bones of someone long gone, a father, a brother, a wife. Each winter, the box is opened. The bones oiled, the names spoken aloud. A ritual of keeping, because memory is a kind of fire, and fire must be fed. They burn herbs now, sweet and sharp, juniper, angelica, bits of dried pine. The smoke curls upward, carrying prayers, carrying thanks, carrying the scent of old forests to the gods above. One man sits alone and sings into the smoke. Not for anyone, just for what was lost. He sings a name, and only the fire answers. And still they wait for the melt, for the stream to trickle again, for the birds to return, for the day the snow softens underfoot. But they do not rush it, because they know there is power in the pause, in the deep breath before motion, in the second silence that comes not from cold, but from peace. A girl dreams of the ocean. She's never seen it, but in her dream it is endless and full of singing. She wakes and tells no one. Instead, she picks up her little carving knife, finds a bit of bone, and begins shaping it into a boat. A very small one, but it floats, and she smiles. They speak of ships again, not yet built, but imagined. Where the sail will go. How many oars? What animal to carve into the prow? A bear, a raven, a dragon with folded wings. They argue, quietly, like men discussing old loves. Each has a vision. Each will build in spring. But for now, it's all drawn in smoke. And still the snow falls. Not hard, not fast, just steady. Like breath, like time. The world outside is white and wide, but inside they are wrapped in layers of memory, fur, ash, fire, story, song. In the end, winter does not leave all at once. It thins like mist. The snow softens, the trees drip. A bird calls once, then again, and the youngest boy rushes outside, points to the sky, screams that the sun feels warm. The others follow. Not to test the truth, but to share the moment. Because spring is not a season, it's a return. But even as they ready their boats, tie down supplies, shape new spears, they glance back at the longhouse, at the snow-mounded roofs, at the empty fire pit, because something of them stayed behind. Something always does. The quiet, the songs, the stillness. It lives there now, waiting for the next winter, the next gathering, the next silence. Let us remember it, too, here in this quiet hour. Let us feel that warmth, that firelight, that togetherness, even as we drift, even as we rest. Because winter, in its cold, offered the deepest peace of all. And in that peace, we sleep. The wind is still tonight, no storm, no howl, just the hush of twilight. Somewhere beyond the trees, the snow crunches under hoof, a reindeer perhaps, or something older, wilder. And tonight we turn inward, not to battle, not to sails or steel, but to the sacred, to the silent faith that shaped the Norse world. A faith not bound in books, but whispered in wind, scratched into wood, sung beside fire. They did not call it religion, not like we do now. To them it was simply the way the world worked, the way things moved, the reason the storm came, the cause of the harvest, the shape of fate. There were gods, yes, but also giants, spirits, creatures, unseen, and everything, from a tree branch to a carved bone, could carry meaning. Nothing was mundane. The gods did not live in heaven. They walked, they laughed, they lost, they were flawed and feared and loved. Odin was the Allfather, one-night wise, a wanderer who traded sight for secrets. He hung on the world tree 9 nights in the cold, pierced by a spear, to learn the runes, not for glory, but for wisdom, for the power of words. Thor was thunder. His hammer Mildnir was the echo in the clouds, the bolt in the storm, protector of men, breaker of giants. He was loud and brave and beloved. They wore his hammer around their necks, like a charm, like a shield. Even now, those amulets are found in graves, worn down by centuries, still clenched in cold hands. There was Freya, goddess of love, of war, of the strange in-between. She rode a chariot pulled by cats, wept tears of gold, and chose the slain with Odin, for not all dead went to Valhalla. Half went with her to the fields of Folkvanger. They say she knew cider, the deepest magic, the kind that bent fate. It was feared, it was honored, it was hers. The gods lived in Asgard, high above the world, across the rainbow bridge, Bifrost, which shimmered with light and danger. But they could fall, and they would fall. For even gods have endings. Ragnarok was the great unraveling, a final battle, a final winter, a burning sky, a broken world. The wolf Fenrir would snap his chains, the serpent Jarmungandr would rise from the sea. The gods would fight, and many would die. But from that ruin, a new world would bloom, green, quiet, cleansed. Even their apocalypse ended in peace. But these were not just stories. They were woven into the land, into the hills and rivers, into stone circles and sacred groves. Not every temple had a roof. Some were glades, fenced with stakes, hung with animal bones, red with sacrifice. There they poured mead to the earth. They chanted, they offered to the gods, to the landvitter, the land spirits, to their ancestors, because the dead were never far. Each longhouse had memories, sometimes carved in beams, sometimes buried beneath the hearth. The past was not a shadow, it was a companion, and they spoke to it, named it, called it by kin. When storms came, they asked the spirits for mercy. When children were born, they whispered blessings, and when they carved a rune, they did not just write. They summoned the runes, simple marks, angled lines, but never just letters. Each carried a name, a sound, a story, for wealth, for cattle, for beginnings, Urus, for strength, for wildness, Ansus, for the god's voice, for breath and wisdom. They were not tools, they were living symbols, inscribed in bone, scratched into bark, etched into blades, carved before battle, hidden under shields, worn on the skin. They believed a single rune, placed right, spoken true, could shift destiny, and perhaps it could. There were seers, vulvas, women of sight. They wore cloaks of feathers, carried staffs wound with brass, eyes pale as snow. They traveled between villages, called upon in times of fear or hope. They sang in trance. They spoke with voices not their own. They saw things hidden, and when they were done, they were honored, given food, warmth, respect, but never touched, never held. They were not quite of this world. Even the most common things, the cup, the hearth, the carved spoon, could be sacred, because everything had spirit. The stone, the tree, the sea, When you crossed the ocean, you offered to Jaeger, god of the sea. When you climbed a mountain, you asked the spirits leave. When you built a home, you buried tokens in the foundation, a boar's tooth, a coin, a charm of iron, not just to bless it, but to make peace with the unseen. The year turned by solstice, by moon, by star. Yule marked the long night, a fire against the dark. They lit candles, slaughtered animals, shared great feasts. Ghosts walked then, so they left offerings on the doorstep, food, ale, a place by the fire, because sometimes the dead just wanted warmth, and sometimes they had warnings. They lived in awe of the sky. The northern lights, to them, were not science. They were spears of the gods, reflections of battles unseen, or the glow from Bifrost when someone crossed. To look up was to listen, to feel watched, to feel part of something enormous. They did not fear it, they welcomed it. Faith was not a thing to be proven. It was known, felt, lived, woven into every act, into the knotwork on a brooch, into the story told in frost, into the silence before sleep. And now, as you rest here in the hush of this hour, let it rest with us, the gods, the runes, the old ways, not as myth, not as noise, but as memory, soft, worn, true. Let the Allfather wander, let the thunder fade, let the runes dream their long dream in stone. For even the sacred rests, and so do we. The fire is low now. Ash settles in soft patterns across the hearth. Smoke curls gently toward the beams. Outside, the world is hushed, as if waiting, as if listening to something being lost. Tonight, we drift toward endings. The Viking Age did not end with a clash. No final sword drawn, no banner fallen in the dust. It ended like a tide pulling away, slow, inevitable, silent. Let us walk with that silence. Let us follow the path from glory to twilight. There was no single moment, no last longship, no last raid, just change, gradual, reluctant, real. The world around the north began to shift. Kingdoms grew stronger, borders hardened. Faith took root in places it had not reached before. Christianity crept north, not as a storm, but as a soft wind that never stopped blowing. It brought with it a new God, a new cross, new songs, new laws, and slowly the hammer gave way to the crucifix. It did not happen without struggle. Some resisted, held fast to the old gods, to Odin, to Thor, to rites whispered in groves where no priest dared walk, but kings saw the future. Harald, Bluetooth King of Denmark, was among the first to convert. He had his name carved in runes on great stones, declaring his faith, his power, his new allegiance. Norway followed, Iceland too. Some chose Christianity, others accepted it. A few fought it, but in the end, the tide came in. Longhouses shrank, stone churches rose. Where there had been skull cups and feasting, there were sermons and sacraments. The bones of ancestors once buried beneath the floor were now moved, blessed, reburied under consecrated ground. And yet the old ways did not vanish. They lingered, in lullabies, in folklore, in the way a child still touched wood before speaking a name. The past never dies. It becomes shadow, echo, thread. The economy shifted to the silver weighed at market stalls was no longer stolen, but minted. Traders replaced raiders. Boats still came, but not to plunder. They came to sell wool, amber, fur, glass beads from faraway lands. Commerce replaced conquest. The same hands that once gripped axes now gripped scales and pens. Scribes recorded what skalds once sang. Runes gave way to Latin. Oral sagas were inked onto vellum, turned into law. Preserved but changed. Families no longer measured status by the width of their longships or the number of men they could summon. Now it was land, tithes, titles granted by kings who no longer sailed, but ruled from stone halls. Feudalism replaced the freedom of the fjords. The great jarlslords of old became vassals. Their independence traded for order. Their wildness softened into legacy. And yet, listen closely, not everything faded. The sea remained, still cold, still calling. The old poems survived, spoken softly at the end of the day. The stories of Thor's hammer, of Odin's ravens, of Loki's tricks, still danced on winter breath. Grandparents passed them to grandchildren, not as truth, not as heresy, but as heritage, as a fire that once burned and still glowed beneath the ash. They were fought in memory, in the tension between what had been and what now was. Take 1066, a year heavy with transition. The death of Harald Hardrada at Stamford Bridge, a king, a warrior, a link to the past. And just days later, the Battle of Hastings. William the Conqueror descended from Vikings himself, seizing England, but no longer as a raider. Now, as a king crowned by church and state, the Viking age ended not with a death, but with a coronation, with a blending of bloodlines and beliefs. Still, the longships did not vanish overnight. They lingered in the fjords, in the designs etched into furniture and tapestry. The dragon heads no longer rode into battle, but into myth. Wood rotted, but legend endured. The Viking spirit, restless, daring, reverent, became something quieter, not extinct, just evolved. The land changed to where once there were hill forts. Now there were stone manors. The wild forests were cleared. The roads were paved. But beneath every field lay shards of the past. A rusted axe head, a runestone fragment, a child's carved toy buried beside their bones. They remain, waiting, telling stories without needing words. And so we find ourselves here, not at an ending, but at a turning. The Viking age did not vanish. It simply closed its eyes, folded its sails, lowered its sword, and walked quietly into the long night. So let us remember it, not for its raids, not only for its kings, but for the silence between waves, the songs beside fire, the beliefs once whispered into birch bark and stone. Let us remember those who watched the world change and still held on to something older, not as protest, but as love. Let us sit beside that memory. Let it settle beside us, like fur-lined cloaks in the cold. And now, as we rest in this moment between epochs, we breathe slowly. The wind is back, soft, carrying the scent of pine and frost. Somewhere far across the sea, a gull cries. The past is quiet, but it is not gone. It lingers, like a song half remembered, like the taste of salt in the air, like runes in worn stone. Still here, still humming beneath the surface, waiting. The fire is nothing but embers now. They glow faintly warm, but fading. Outside, the sea rests. The stars no longer wheel. They simply watch, and here, beneath them, you are still, wrapped in the hush of time, drifting with memory. We have wandered far tonight, across oceans and ages, through battles and birch forests, past kings crowned in fire, and sailors lost to fog. We've walked in the shadows of longships, heard the creak of oars, felt the weight of old steel, and sat beside men and women who lived long before us, but not so differently. And now, as their voices grow distant, we hold only their echoes, gentle ones, not of war cries, not of thunder, but of softer things. A child watching the sea from the cliffs, a mother mending a wool cloak by lamplight, a warrior whispering a prayer before dawn. These are the threads that remain, and they are enough. History does not shout forever. It hums, low, slow, like a lullaby hummed by the land itself. And when we listen, really listen, we find ourselves in it, in the pauses, in the footfalls, in the quiet choices made under cold skies. It's strange, isn't it, to feel so close to people so far, to touch a world built of fire, frost, and faith, and find yourself reflected in it, their fears, their hopes, their longings, all still familiar, all still here. Tonight we spoke of sails and swords, of exile and return, of kings who never knew peace, and peasants who never asked for glory. But more than that, we spoke of time, of how it stretches, folds, returns, and how, in the end, we all walk the same path. Not one paved in stone, but in stories, stories passed from mouth to mouth, from campfire to cradle, until they reach you, until you carry them gently, for a little while, and maybe that's the point. Not to remember every date, every name, every place, but to remember that they lived, that they stood where you now stand, that they watched the same moon and wondered the same things, that history is not behind you, it is beneath you, and it dreams still. So breathe, softly, now. Let the weight of it all settle, not heavy, but grounding. Let the cold wind of the fjords blow past your cheek just once more. Let the hush of winter woods wrap around your shoulders. Let the sea that carried 1,000 ships carry you now, to stillness, to slumber, to peace. And when you wake, it will still be there. Not loud, not urgent, but patient, waiting to tell you another story, waiting to remind you that the past is never really gone, only resting, like you. So close your eyes, drift down, sink deep into the quiet. The fire is out, the waves are calm, the stars blink slowly above, and the stories sleep with you. Until next time, good night.